What is good, NBA fans? How are we? Another week in the books for the NBA. We are drawing to a close of the season itself, and we finally have the playoffs locked in that we at least know who is making it and who is not. Officially, everybody on the outside is now looking in, and the top 10 teams have been set in stone. The only fluctuation as of right now is whether or not Denver is going to be in the actual playoffs or in the play-in game. And if Miami is going to, not Miami, Minnesota is going to be able to jump them. That's it. Everything else has been locked. Now there's jockeying position within the top six and, the bottom four in each, and as to how everything's going to play out there. But we at least know who the 20 teams are that are going to make it. And with the Lakers losing last night and San Antonio winning, that was the last of the potentials of someone on the outside looking in, making it. But the Lakers losing and San Antonio getting a hell of a victory in Denver last night, that secured that fate. So the Lakers are now out. The Spurs are in. And basically, if Denver wins one game, they've locked in a top 6 spot in the West. And then there's just the jockeying for position and who goes where. Because they could end up Denver above Utah. It's entirely possible. And Utah drops down to the 6. And then now, at that point, we'll figure it out. We'll do that on a later date. But it's locked. It's done. The Lakers are now officially out. And we don't have to have a discussion about this team anymore. I've avoided them, more often than not. I don't focus on the teams that aren't doing well. But I had a conversation over the weekend with a buddy of mine who's a realistic Lakers fan. And he was I asked him, I was like, do you want to make the play-in game? Is that something? Or would you rather just put a bullet in the head of the season and just, it's a lame horse. Just put it down. It's better for it in the long run. And he was doing that. Look, if we make it in, you still got to beat us 4 times in 7, assuming you get past the first 2 rounds of the play-in game. It's like, I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess that's possible, but now I don't have to have those conversations. So your playoff schedules, or teams rather, are locked. Now it's just a matter of who's playing where, and we'll figure that out in due course over the next few days. But today we're talking about the end of season awards. And I got to be honest, clearly I don't have a vote in this. And yet I stressed about this way too much, as if I have a vote, as if my voice is going to sway some sort of outcome or opinion. But that being said, I stressed about this way too much. So the topics we're going to cover today are MVP, the 3 All-NBA teams, Rookie of the Year, and then just as a throw-in, Coach of the Year. But primarily focus on those other 3 and predominantly on the first 2. So I'll start with the MVP. And I ranked my top 5. I probably could have gone through and done top 10. There are a lot of deserving candidates. I think, there are 6 or so very legitimate ones, maybe 7 or 8. But it's a race to the finish for the top 3. And Embiid is making a late season push. He's grabbed the scoring title. LeBron would have to play, I think it's 2 more games to qualify for the scoring title. But at this point, I got to assume it makes more sense just to sit out the rest of the season. There's no point in creating a long-term injury. I realize that, you're coming up on year 20 in the league and there aren't too many years left, but saving your body should be the order of the day, as opposed to coming back and trying to put up another 40 or 50 piece to regain the scoring champ lead. But yet he'd have to play 2 more games, and right now he's no longer scoring champ. That is in Embiid's corner right now, and Embiid seems hell bent on getting that. Although Giannis is nipping at his heels, it could come down to the two of them. Although against the Bulls last night, I watched that game, and the first quarter it was like Giannis was getting everybody else involved, and it's just like they got the hot hands. So let's just have them continue to shoot. And where I think Embiid may be focused on getting that scoring title, I think Giannis might be focused on just getting his teammates going. And I'm not knocking Embiid for that because his team desperately needs him to do that because Harden, you don't know exactly what you're going to get night in, night out from a former MVP candidate and former MVP. But it's a top 3 race. It is Embiid, who I mentioned, Giannis, who I mentioned, and Jokic. Those are your 3 candidates. And however you want to divvy this up and slice it, I think all 3 have a deserving case. More often than not, on MVP, like a few guys are in the discussion, but for me, there is a clear favorite. It's like this guy to me is the MVP. And this year I am shading towards one over the others. But if you wanted to sell me, hey, I think it's so and so, I'm more than willing to hear this discussion or hear the argument for. Because I think you have 3 very deserving candidates. And to be perfectly honest, I think 4 or 5 that are all legitimate within the discussion for the MVP. So my 5 total candidates, I'll just give you my 5 candidates, and then we'll discuss where I ranked them. Booker, Giannis, Doncic, Jokic, and Embiid. Those are in my 5. And I think my number 1 overall, my order specifically goes like this. I take Jokic as MVP. I think Giannis is second. Embiid is third. Booker is fourth. And Doncic is fifth. And I give the slight edge to Book over Doncic because you need to reward this Phoenix team because it's head and shoulders above everybody else in the league. And then when Chris Paul goes down, they don't skip a beat. And Booker's efficiency stays basically the same. There's a slight uptick for him. But instead of trying to force his hand, force the situation, and start leveraging more shots, he just made sure the rest of the offense and defense was involved. And the steady leadership that Chris Paul provides trickles down to now Devin Booker is out there, just a steadying force of, I'm still going to give you exactly what I give you night in, night out on a team that is crushing the league. I think he's got to be in this discussion. But the reason I take Jokic number 1 is if you look at the cast of characters that are starting next to him, it's Aaron Gordon and Monty Morris, Will Barton, and JaMychal Green. 3 of those guys should be coming off the bench and running with the second unit. Gordon's a starter. You could sell me on one of those other 3 being in the starter position as well. But JaMychal Green should be coming off the bench. And, either Monty Morris or Will Barton should be coming off the bench as well. And just running wild through the second unit. And Jokic has them in contention for a tough out night in, night out. And the record difference between Philly and Denver is marginal best. It's a couple games. So it's not like you look directly at the seeding as some people are prone to do and be like, well, Philly, a couple of weeks ago it was like, well, Philly is the 2 seed and Denver is the 6 seed. How is this a discussion? And she's like, well, you really need to clip off the top 2 teams in the West because they're better than everybody in the East. So if you take them out of the and technically, you know, so already it just kind of levels the playing field when you look at that. But if you just go head to head on record, it's like, well, they're roughly just about the same on record. And then if you look at the 2 starting lineups, there's been more consistency within Philly's organization. And then they added someone like James Harden, which unfortunately does have an effect on the evaluation of Embiid because it just made his life easier, at least hypothetically. I mean, I think I might trust Tyrese Maxey at this point more than I do either of the 2 starting guards for the Nuggets. And he's young in the league. He doesn't have the established track record of a bunch of other guys in this discussion. And then if you go through the advanced metrics, damn near every metric has Jokic as the number 1. And in some cases, Jokic is the number 1 by leaps and bounds over everybody else. But I think it's Jokic gives that team everything it needs to be successful. So if it's like, oh, you need me to score tonight? Well, then I will score tonight. If we need me to find guys as they're cutting and be more of a point guard out there, I'm doing that. If we need rebounds, I'm doing that. His defense is better than most people give him credit for. But if you look at the numbers, he's actually a pretty good defender these days. Now, my second is Giannis. And I just think for two-way player, technically there's nobody better in the league right now. And if you wanted to sell me on that being the case for him being MVP, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with either of the 3 of these guys winning. But I think it's a 3-person race between them. I think Jokic is having historically one of the best seasons. He's going to hit like a weird scoring benchmark, assist benchmark, and rebound benchmark. If you technically, he's been top 10 in scoring, rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals at various points in the league. Right now, he's top 15 for all of those. I think points, rebounds, and assists, he's top 10. And steals and rebounds, he might be just on the outside looking in. But he just gives that team a little bit of everything. Whereas if you put Embiid on Denver and put Jokic on the Sixers, I think Denver recedes just slightly, and I think the Sixers increase just slightly. I think that's the net positive of having Jokic on your team versus Embiid is just a little bit better. And then the discussion of Giannis in this mix of, at this point, he's pretty much a bucket whenever he wants to. He's extended his legitimate shot selection out further and further and further. I mean, he had that great late 3 against the Nets the other night. And previous seasons, because I watched that game, that would be like oh, dear God, you really shouldn't have Giannis shooting that shot. And if it goes in, it's just a bonus. And now it's like there's a good chance. It's not excellent. It's not like he's top tier, but that just shows you the improvement of his game of you have to respect him now from every zone on the court offensively. Now, he hasn't extended out to the Curry, Lillard shooting from the logo area. And I'm sure there will be occasional shots from there throughout the course of a season, but he's not going to consistently pull up from that range. But maybe in time, I mean, given how every season he seems to work on and add another facet to his game, and getting over the free throw hump, I think, was the biggest. Now that you can't just hack him late in game and assume he's going to shoot 55 to 60% from the line. And, you know, as evidenced by that closeout game in the finals last year, it could be a huge detriment if you're just going to consistently foul him. Um, because when he does not shy away from the big moment. He seems to thrive on it. And you can no longer say, like the James Harden argument a few years ago, well, hey, if I was 7 foot and I could dunk like that, it'd be a lot easier. To like, look, you know, there's that is a distillation of one aspect of what he does. And he even made fun of that after the game where he hit the three against the Nets. Um, but then you factor in Giannis's defense, and at certain points this season, he entered into discussion for defensive player of the year. And I'm not going to get to that today. Um, just because I think that one, the season needs to close out. And I haven't the foggiest idea who is going to win that this year. In years past, it's like, boom, this guy, he's held the crown for the entire duration of the season. But this season has been more of a open discussion. Like Marcus Smart is entered the chat, and he may be your defensive player of the year by the end of this. And I would say a deserving case. You could make a case for quite a few people this year. Robert Williams before he went down, another Celtic. There's one. Jaren Jackson, I think, would be an interesting choice. Rudy Gobert, if Draymond hadn't been hurt all season and he played like he did to start, although I think those days now have sailed. Giannis is in that mix. I think there's a lot of deserving candidates on that front, and it's not as easy a discussion. But Giannis is the only one on this list where how many guys are actually in two major award category discussions? And I don't think Giannis is going to sniff defensive player of the year, but he could end up top 5. If you end up top 5 there and you end up top 5 in MVP, I feel like that should elevate you like for some sort of combined best overall player. Like there's MVP and then there's defensive player. And if you manage to be in the discussion for both, then you get a secondary award that's just the biggest badass of the year or something ridiculous. So I think it comes down to those three guys. I have Jokic as the best player this season. And there was a tweet I saw last night where there's a whole bunch of, Kobe Stan accounts. And I'd be curious to know how many there would have been pre-accident versus post-accident. That's neither here nor there. But talking about, it's a quote from him saying the AAU, I'll give you a distillation of it. The AAU is not preparing American kids for the NBA, and this league is going to be run by international players in the not too distant future. And right now, 4 of my 5 MVP candidates are international players. Jokic is going to be a back-to-back. Giannis, Embiid, and Doncic. And Doncic entered this discussion basically since January 1st, they're playing like a mid-60 win team, percentage-wise. And he's another guy where it would be tough for me to substitute anybody else into that system as they've created, and they're going to get a general uptick overall. Because he has the ball in his hands so much that for a heliocentric player like that, there are very few that are as willing a passer and can get everybody kind of cooking. And you would, all the knocks on him coming into the league was just like, his athleticism is going to be his downfall. Just like he's got so many other facets of his game, but his footwork is so crisp that it can overcome those, deficits on the physical attribute side. But there's 4 or 5 guys on the international front dominating the discussion. And I have Booker in here just as a nod to that's how good the Spurs have been. If he ends up as number 6 and Jason Tatum is elevated above him, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think at this point, the sentiment might be shifting towards we should reward the Suns in some regard on this. And I agree. That's what I would do if I had a vote. They're my top 5. Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, Booker, and Doncic. We'll move on to all NBA. Now, the nice thing is, my first team and second team, there was a slight fluctuation in the forward spot in the second team. I switched it out about 20 minutes before I started recording. My third team is where I got questions galore. And if the chat wants to chime in, I'm all happy for it because I don't have a vote. So none of this is locked and none of this is set in stone. This is just a one person's snapshot of the league, just like all of you watching have snapshots of the league yourselves and how you feel about it. And also, I wish I had the time to watch all the games from every team, but I have to cherry pick. I mean, last night I watched 3 games. I had 2 going simultaneously. But it was an anomaly. Usually it's just like I get to watch one game tonight and I watch that game. So I don't see as much of the league as I would like to. And there are certain teams that I just don't want to watch unless it's been a while and I force myself to like, I'm going to watch them tonight. And especially given this matchup, because I haven't watched this other team in a while either. But I haven't lived with them as much as their fan bases have predominantly. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. I watch a lot of Bulls and then West Coast teams just because it's easy to fit into my schedule given the time, and then certain East Coast teams that I just thoroughly enjoy watching. But beyond that, of 30 teams, there's probably 16 or so where I only check in sporadically with them. So I do what I can, This isn't a full-time gig for me, so I carve out the time to try and fit it all in because I love basketball. And also, if I'm going to sit here and be a blowhard once a week, I'd like to be an educated blowhard. So to move on to the all NBA teams. So I'm going to take advantage of the fungible nature of what the NBA is doing, saying that certain guys qualify at 2 positions. I don't like it. But I also think the NBA should just shift away from this dogmatic approach of it's got to be a center, it's got to be 2 forwards, and it's got to be 2 guards. I think we should just do the top 15 players. And if it's a center-heavy year, then a bunch of centers make it. Whatever the case is, I think it should be reflective of who the 15 best players are, not according to the rigid definition of, well, they played this position and this position is awarded this many spots. So that's what we're going to do. I don't know. I don't think given where the trajectory of modern NBA, that makes a lot of sense personally, but I am going to take advantage of the fluid nature of the definition of some of these guys and say my first team is Jokic at center, Embiid at forward, Giannis at forward, Booker and Doncic. My 1 through 5 for MVP is now 1 through 5 on all NBA. We're done. Easy peasy. I don't have to make cases for it. It was that simple. I was like, I like that. If you want to sell me on, because last year I took more of the rigid approach of, look, there's only one center on the first team. And unfortunately, somebody's going to get knocked to the second team. But given how close this MVP race is, the fact that one of these guys, either Embiid or Jokic, is going to make second team. And the shitty thing is, if because they split the vote, you only get the votes accrued at that position. So it would take collusion from all the sports writers to go, all right, we're all going to vote Jokic at center and Embiid at forward. But if there's any kind of split there, then it's going to knock one of them down to the second team, and it's just going to end up screwing over. So you could have a case where, because right now it sounds like most people, when they discuss it, they're putting Embiid at center and Jokic at forward. So if Embiid gets all the center votes and the forward votes are split on Jokic, he could end up winning MVP and then making second team, which is just stupid. We should just have top 15 players. Just done and done. Let's go to the NBA front office and the NBPA, the Players Association, hash it out and be like, guys, let's get rid of this. I realize there's going to be some resistance from certain players, especially centers. They could be iced out of this, but I doubt it. I mean, Giannis is basically a center, although they got Lopez back now, so he's gone back to his traditional forward position. But he plays center in some of their small ball lineups, and I just think that's the nature of the NBA today. So that's easy. First team, done. If you want to give me an argument as to somebody else making it in, I am more than happy to hear it. My second team is Karl Anthony Towns at center. It's crazy that he's raised his game up this much, but I think how well that team is finally playing after having all this talent. I mean, they've got 3 lottery draft picks, starting for them in Cat, Edwards, and D'Angelo Russell. And it was enough to get them over the hump. They are officially something. And I think Cat is deserving of that second team center spot. Forward, Jason Tatum. Now, he's the guy where if we want to go with more of the rigid structure and we're only going to choose one forward in that, one center, and then the other one is going to be relegated to the second team, then I think you elevate Tatum up and Tatum gets a first team. I think he's the one that gets bumped up off of this. And he's having an incredible season. He's finally blossomed into the player we all assumed he would be at this point. You see it on the outside, like, looking in when he's a rookie and they make Eastern Conference Finals and he goes toe to toe with LeBron in LeBron's, peak. And you're staring at this going, this is going to be a real problem for the Eastern Conference because they've already got this young kid. And then they added Jaylen Brown to it. And you're like, oh man, once they figure out NBA speed, this team is going to be just a handful every night. And then the past couple seasons, it's fell short. I know I personally had higher expectations for him every season. And then this year, I brought it down. I was like, I am sick of getting burned, like in my Eastern Conference preview, because I had them higher and I had Memphis higher. I had Memphis originally third in my Western Conference preview, but I dropped them down. I was like, oh, God, that's a lot of growth for a young team. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I just like the youth of it. And if you looked around at the field around them, it's like it's a lot of teams getting older. That youth should serve them, but I didn't see second by a mile. But Tatum, he's made the leap. And there's a story floating around where he was with the same trainer that works with Embiid And that guy was on the phone with Embiid, and Tatum told him to tell Embiid, "Hey, you better win MVP this year because I'm going to win it next year." And to have that kind of drive and motivation, it's also when I watch the Celtics, it's nice to see him not settle for contested, late shot clock, uh, uh, long twos and threes when he had been dribbling for like 5, 6 seconds instead of forcing the advantage and trying to penetrate and get the defense to collapse. It's good to see him not just settle. Not saying that that isn't a good shot for him, but to consistently do it night in, night out, it's like, come on, man. You need to be driving to the basket to get to the free throw line, to get the defense in trouble, to have them collapse, to kick out to an open teammate. And you'll see him do that on a greater frequency now. Um, and it's also, I don't know that I want him to push much further than where he's at right now because that's my fear with any of the high flyers that barrel into contact. And I'm looking at you, Ja. It's like this could lead to a catastrophic injury eventually. As exciting as it is, it also, if I were a Memphis fan, it'd put the fear of God into my heart at least once a game where he goes flying into traffic and does something absolutely stunning. But then it's just like, if that went wrong, that could have been a season-ending injury in some capacity. Thankfully, he's a guard doing that and not someone bigger. So his joints aren't carrying as much of a load. But still, it does make you worry. So my next forward spot, it came down to a discussion of DeRozan or KD. And DeRozan, he qualified at the guard for All-Star, but he's a forward. Let's not kid ourselves. It's precisely what he is. And between the two of them, I mean, he's played 20 more games than KD. He was in the MVP discussion for a few weeks. He's since dropped out. It's a long season, and it's tough to stay in that discussion the entire time. But I think the consistency, the durability, and if you need him to go out and get you 40, he'll get you 40. You need a game-winning shot, he'll get you a game-winning shot. He is absolutely money from that 15, 16-foot area pretty much every time. I love watching it when he gets into his bag around the free throw line, be like, that's guaranteed. Even when he misses it, it looks good. KD is the better player, but I think at this point, like, I don't even know. KD hasn't played enough, and I don't even know if he would get to the threshold of being able to qualify for something like scoring champ. That's how few games he's played at this point. So he needs to close out the season to even enter into discussion for the threshold of 70% of the games. But he's not at that right now. So given that choice between the two, I went with DeRozan. I think you can obviously tell KD is one of my two locks for second team or third team rather. So KD, go ahead and mark it down. He's one of my locks for forward on the third team. I only have two locks. I have questions galore, and that's when I'll be looking to the chat because I'd like to hear your opinions. I don't know what to do at a few different positions, and then they'll have a tumbling effect for me, but I'll explain it when we get to it. So DeRozan is my other one. My next choice was came down to there's three guards I think vying for the second team position. It's Curry, Morant, and Trae Young. I think those are your three guys that it's really, you can make a case for all of them. I think the biggest case against Ja is that the team is winning at a clip where they're 20-3 without Ja as of right now. Or it's 22-3. It's one of the two. I want to say it's 20-3 without Ja, which would equate to almost a 70-win team without Ja. It shows you the overall depth because even when he goes down and then Jaren Jackson goes down, who is in the could he make the discussion for this? I have him down as one of the potentials for the third team. Um, but then it's if I'm going to award 2 from 1, it's going to be Phoenix, and that's part of the questions section that I have. Trae Young has, after that ridiculously slow start from that team, they're finally putting it together. And some semblance of what we saw last year is coming to fruition at the end of this season. And then Steph, you can really see what he means to that team when he's out. Because suddenly the entire offense looks completely different. And the gravity that he provides on offense is wildly apparent. Now, statistically speaking, Curry's having just an okay year, but that's against other Curry years. If you stack that up against the rest of the league, it's a good season. But if you look at it, some of Curry's other seasons, be like, well, those were historically great seasons, a couple of them in particular. His MVPs, and then, one or two of the seasons after he got MVP, it's absolutely astounding the types of numbers that he puts up. So do we knock him because he hasn't reached the mountaintop that only he's reached this season? Does he take a hit and drop down to the third team because of that? Because there's an excellent case for Trae making the second team and Ja making the second team and Curry being dropped down to the third. Or if you want to say it's Ja makes the third and those two guys get elevated, sure. I'm here for it, but I put down Curry and Ja just because Ja was in the MVP discussion for a while. The Hawks turned it on this late in the season, whereas the Warriors and Memphis, they're they're top tier in the West, and they've been that way pretty much the entire season. And they've had a bullseye on their back for the entire season, and they've played like it. So I think I would take those two. So that's my second team. It's Karl Anthony Towns, Jason Tatum, DeMar DeRozan, Steph Curry, and Ja Morant. But I'm not mad at you if you want to make any substitutions there. If you want to put KD over DeRozan, sure. If you want to put Trae over Curry and Morant, sure. But moving on to the third team. So the two locks I've got are Durant and Trae. Done. Now here's where I'm having trouble. The third team, we'll start with center. I don't know who to select. I don't know who's going to make that third team. I wrote down Gobert, Adebayo, and Jared Allen, even though Allen's going to miss the remainder of the regular season. And there's, last I saw was the hope is that he still comes back. He elected not to have surgery, and the hope, thinking, well, surgery would take him out for sure. By not having the surgery, he might be able to come back and help in the playoffs. But here's a problem. So if we select, say we take Gobert, when I think automatically I knock Mitchell out of discussion for the guard because I'm not taking two Jazz personally. And if we take Adebayo, well, then I'm knocking Jimmy Butler out because I don't think we take two Heat in the discussion. The Heat, really, for being number one in the East and holding on to it, it's been a mash unit for a lot of the season. And I think that's where the individual awards aren't going to be representative of that team. Because I just don't know who exactly qualifies and who should make. I'm leaning towards Butler over Adebayo. If you just take out Butler's three-point shooting, then I think statistically he makes a hell of a case. And then that means automatically that Gobert is going to make the center because I'm not going to have Adebayo and Butler on my third team. But in Gobert's case, he's still really good, but his team is so thoroughly sick of playing with him. I mean, just flat out. And they're going to blow that team up in some regard in the offseason. Whether it's Gobert or Mitchell, one of those two guys is not going to be on the team next year. Now, every Utah fan, if you were to ask them, would say, well, I want Gobert gone. I want to hold on to Mitchell. Even though Gobert is numerous time defensive player of the year, I can't imagine any Jazz fan saying Gobert is who you win a championship. This is who you build around. I just don't think that's the case given the modern NBA. It's somebody like Donovan Mitchell. That's the type of player that you build around to win a championship. But then is Donovan Mitchell a strong enough candidate to build around to win a championship? Now with Danny Ainge there, I don't know. Previously, had it been the old brain trust, it'd be a no-brainer. They're going to hold on to Mitchell and they're going to figure this out. With Ainge there, I don't have the slightest clue. I'm guessing that guy is taking calls on anybody on the roster at this point, and there is no sacred individual. They're all sacrificial goats for the greater good of moving the franchise forward. And if Mitchell's gone, then Quinn Snyder's gone. And now he is, I can't remember who brought it up in the chat a couple weeks ago, asking if I had heard any of the rumors around Quinn Snyder to the Lakers. But reports started coming out last night as soon as the defeat was over. Lakers and Vogel likely to part ways at the end of the season. Unsurprising that he's going to get the axe, even though this isn't his fault. It was team construction. This roster doesn't make a lot of sense. That moving on. I think Quinn Snyder's gone. So part of me then wants to take Adebayo because Gobert's own team doesn't seem to want him. And should voters be voting like that? Yeah, I don't know. Does that factor into all NBA? Perhaps it should, because otherwise you're just saying it's all statistical. And if it's all statistical, then Jokic is the MVP and there is no discussion. So it's never all just one thing. So I think the fact that the other dominant individual on his team does not want to play with him anymore tells me all I need to about Gobert, which means I'm going to put Adebayo at center. And that solves that quandary. So then Jimmy Butler is off. And then it becomes a discussion of Siakam or Jaren Jackson Jr. for the other forward position. And I think if any team's going to have two representatives, it's going to be Phoenix. And unless I make a case that for that last position, because I iced off Rudy Gobert, because then it becomes the final one is Donovan Mitchell versus CP3. And CP's missed a bunch of games. But as stated, that team is head and shoulders above everybody else. Shouldn't they have two guys on all NBA? Isn't CP3 deserving of that final guard position? And if I'm going to allow two Phoenix on, then it allows me to have Jaren Jackson at the forward position. But I think to spread the love around, the only team that potentially could get two. So I'm going to say Siakam. Even though I wouldn't be shocked in the offseason if they traded Siakam. If they could get a good enough return, I think Masai would gladly field those calls. Because I don't think Pascal wants to be there, even though they coached him up. They got him from somebody on the outside looking in and built him up to the all-star, all-NBA max guy that he is. Except I don't think he's a full max guy. But I'm not going to put, for that other forward position, I'm not going to put LeBron on there. I'm sure he's going to make it, but when your team that you put together, as much as you might try and distance yourself from that reality, at the start of the season, you were more than open with the fact of you helped recruit to get Westbrook there. And there's no way the front office makes a move like that without you and AD signing off on it because you're sacrificing so much depth. So you were the GM that helped put all this together. And yes, you're putting up a boatload of points, and it's really impressive in your 19th season. But this has to be one of the worst collapses of a team I've ever seen. One that had the expectations of we're going to win a championship. They're all crowing before the start of the season about, you know, LeBron's tweet was keep that same energy at the end of the season that you have now, talking about how we're too old and too slow and we can't do it. Bring that at the end of the season and we'll see where we're at. And we're at the end of the season. And guess what? You guys were too old and you were too slow and the team didn't make a lot of sense. And you were part of the architects of this team. Something probably the biggest disappointment in Laker team history. And your team is gonna end up minimum 15 or 16 games under 500. You're not even gonna sniff 40 wins. It's not gonna happen. The best the best they can be right now would be 34 and 48. But there is a world in which they go 31 and 51, and you're suddenly 20 games under 500. I don't think anybody that's on a team that wins 31 games, no matter how many points they put up, is deserving of this. This is the equivalent of when it's a bad rookie of the year, and you just give it to the guy that scored the most points and be like, well, of course he scored the most points and he got a bunch of stats because that team sucks. It was the knock on Booker for a long time. Just like Phoenix sucks. Of course he's putting up tons of points. What other options do they have? Am I taking this guy seriously? I'm not, because the team sucks, even though they got to he puts up, tons of points. Who cares? So why does LeBron exist on a different standard? And it'll be a legacy pick. If LeBron makes it, it is purely a legacy pick of he's LeBron. And I get it. It just no longer is that enough to elevate you above. So I'm keeping him off. So I'm going Siakam, then my forward. And then the last guard position, it's Donovan Mitchell or CP3. Now, by taking Adebayo, I still think I'd rather take CP3 over Donovan Mitchell. I don't know. What do you guys think? I like spreading the love around and getting somebody from all the different teams. And so by taking Mitchell, then we have 15 different teams represented here, which is half the league. And it's spreading the love around. And Utah has been good. They're sitting in fifth. They could drop down to sixth. So I guess you could make a case that that isn't enough to enter this discussion. But Cat is in seventh currently on Minnesota, and I put him on second team. I don't know. Do you guys have any vote? Who would you take, CP3 or Mitchell? I'll let you chime in the chat. There's quite a few people there. Uh, you know, so we'll come back to that one. We'll settle that one later. I'm leaning towards CP3, but I'm not against having Mitchell. And it's unfortunate for Mitchell that he comes up on that last spot, but there's a lot of good guards. What are you going to do? All right, so the final two that we're going to discuss today are Coach of the Year and Rookie of the Year. Coach of the Year, Monty Williams is going to win it. I think deservedly so. I thankfully, a lot of times, Coach of the Year will go to whoever the guy in the newest situation that has elevated the team from a previous height to a new height, or taking somebody like Tibbs from the bottom into playoff contention. But this year, Monty, it's like he probably should have won it last year. I'm happy to see him win it this year. I think there's quite a few good deserving candidates. I would have Taylor Jenkins from Memphis second, uh, Spo third, just because I brought it before. It's been a mash unit all year. And the fact that you have Caleb Martin, Max Struess looks legit. That guy is good. They just keep finding cast-offs, G League, second rounders, and Spoelstra finds a good place for them to shine. And I'd like a historical record of the fact that Spo, once again, has taken a team that other coaches would have squandered, and they would be in first. They'd probably be somewhere like sixth or seventh, even though you have a bevy of really good players. I think that him entering in saying he's like the third best on this ballot works for me. I'd have JB Bickerstaff as fourth for the Cavs. If they weren't decimated by injuries, he could be giving Monty Williams a run for his money this year for Coach of the Year. But I think that weirdly for Coach of the Year, we're happy to elevate somebody that's brand new. For other awards, it's like you got to prove a track record. And Bickerstaff, if the Cavs come back and improve upon last year and are even more of a juggernaut next year, I think it's his award to lose next year. 5, I would put Ime Udoka for Boston, and then 6, Jason Kidd. And Kidd is the, fresh young face on the block. And then there's, Budenholzer, and there's still a collection of coaches that are worthy of this discussion. But I think it's Monty Williams is going to win this in a landslide. And I agree. I think he probably should have won it last year. And the team is that much better than everybody else. So let's give it to the guy that is leading the team that is that much better than everybody else. Done and done. So far, it looks like CP3 is leading the early voting. And CP3 just might make it in over Mitchell. There's only one team, in my opinion, that deserves 2 on there. And it would be Phoenix. All right, so to close out, we're going to do Rookie of the Year. And this is a thing of beauty. There's a lot of good rookies this year. And then there's a bunch of rookies where in previous years, like the draft class would be weak. And if you got somebody as good as Ayo Dosunmu for Chicago, you'd be happy. And I am. I love Ayo. He's been awesome. That's the type of player you can win a championship with. It's perfect. He's just happy to play whatever the role you need him to play. He's effort, intensity. He's not in my Rookie of the Year, but I'm just saying that's how deep this draft class is. There's a ton of excellent players. They're going to be making noise and potential faces of franchise and guys that will be in discussions for quite a few years to come. I think right now it's a 3-man race between Barnes, Cunningham, and Mobley. I think those are your 3 guys that are going to be in full on in this discussion. And for me, for almost the entirety of the season, I went Evan Mobley. I was more impressed with him night in, night out whenever I watched the Cavs versus when I watched Toronto or the sporadic Pistons game. Although I saw more early season Pistons as opposed to the individual that Cade has blossomed into over the past couple months. And he hit like an inverse rookie wall. Usually it's towards the end of the season and the Rooks start to slow down because they're just not used to this many games. And instead, he started off slow. He was also couldn't join the team initially, so he didn't start the season with them. Um, and then when he got there, it was like he had that first night, he had a bad shooting night, and people were dragging him. And then slowly but surely, he has just matured over that time to enter this discussion. I think right now, by Vegas odds, he's either second or third in the odds, and that's impressive. And Mobley had been the runaway for me all season. And then towards the end now, the more I watch, the more impressed I am with Scotty Barnes. I just think that dude's ceiling to me is really impressive. With his size, his skill set, and attributes, I mean, he sees the floor beautifully. I don't know how many times I've watched them and he's running point on fast break and he just looks completely confident. His head isn't down, it's up, looking around, trying to find the most advantageous pass for his teammates, or if he needs to just push the envelope because the defense is lax to get in for an easy layup or dunk. Um, and that's just one facet of it. And I'm not knocking. If Mobley wins this, I was on the Mobley bandwagon all season when Barnes. It's weird. The discussion early on was Barnes is the rookie of the year. And I was like, man, you guys watching this Mobley? This dude is crazy impressive. And then when he would go out to look at the record of the Cavs without him, a rookie, and you're like, look at this. This is crazy. And then as the discussion is bled over to, I think Mobley might be the odds-on favorite to win now. Now I've gone the other direction and be like, I think you guys are discounting Scotty Barnes here. And I didn't notice it until after my opinion had changed. And I guess now my opinion wasn't in lockstep with where the voting and betting odds were going. And I was like, dude, this Scotty Barnes guy. And that's the thing. There's those three. You got Wagner on Orlando. He looks awesome. Josh Giddey, before he went down hurt, he looks awesome. Jalen Green, my only knock on Jalen Green, it's a big one. His defense is atrocious, isn't even a strong enough word. But there was a discussion about a third of the way through the season and being like, oh, maybe he wasn't worthy of that lottery pick. And, it's a long season. And he's come on. He's done not quite the full-on Cade, but he's entered into the chat. And then there's other guys on top of that. You got the Duarte on Indy. I like him a lot. We'll see if Suggs for Orlando figures this out. It's like this rookie class is really good. There's a whole bunch of guys that I would love to have on my team. And that's kind of a rarity. Normally it's like 1, 2, maybe 3. But I would love to have Scotty Barnes, or Evan Mobley, or Cade Cunningham. Haven't even talked about like Kuminga. That dude athletically is so wildly impressive to watch. I'd take Kuminga. I'd take Wagner. I'd take Giddey. I'd take Jalen Green. Duarte looks interesting. Like there are a bunch of teams that should be happy. Davion Mitchell, maybe in time that trade of getting rid of Halliburton won't look as crazy if he blossoms into something pretty legitimate. And slowly but surely, it seems like he's getting better and better as time goes on. But yeah, I think I'd give it to Scotty Barnes. But this, MVP on some level, I feel like everybody should get an award in the top chunk here because they're all really good. And it's not, thankfully, it's the worst when the rookie class is wildly underwhelming and you give it to the one I always think of is Michael Carter-Williams on Philly. I never liked him. Well, I saw 2 games of his in college because at that point I'd stopped watching college. And on the second game, it was in the tournament, and all the discussion was this dude is going to be a lottery pick. And I watched him. I was like, this guy? And then he got to Philly, and his stats looked good. And you're like, yeah, but they are openly tanking. This team does not make sense on paper or on the court. So somebody has to score. And this rookie class is not that. It's like, wow, the future is bright for the league. The future is very bright for the league. And I couldn't be happier about that. But there we go. I think CP3, the chat voted, and they would say CP3. So that'll get the final spot. And there are the end of season awards. That show is wrapped. I stressed for way too long, but it was worth it, wasn't it? We're all happy. We're satisfied at the end of this. We got to some sort of conclusion and resolution. So I'd like to thank everybody that joined in the chat. Yuri McGarley, Chris Miner, Riley Pengrass, Diamond Rattler, Ilan Hernandez. I think that's everybody. I appreciate you guys chiming in, voting, leaving your opinions. I didn't have time to really get into much of the discussion. But we'll save that for another week. We get the playoffs coming up. I haven't decided because my schedule is still in quite a bit of flux right now if I'm going to do 2 shows a week. So I'll keep you posted. I'll make a decision by next week. Hopefully, might have a clearer picture of where we're at. But it might have to be a certain weeks, whichever day that I'm thinking about doing it. I might have to tape like on occasion the night before and then put it out so it won't be live. I will try and select a day where I'm live at all times if I end up adding a second day. Or maybe I just do short little 15, 20-minute recap shows here and there. I don't know. But I think that's it for this week's show. You can follow me anywhere at Matt Knost. Thanks again to everybody that joined me. Jeremy Bowers, I didn't see you there. You get a shout out. Joining in the chat. And I'll see you guys next week. The play-in games will have just started by that point, and we'll start to get an idea as to what the actual matchups for the playoffs will be. But enjoy playoff basketball. I'll see you guys next week for another edition of Dropping Dimes. And that is it. Stay safe out there. Adios.